A patent is the legally protected, exclusive right to an invention, process, or product, like GPS or the Shark Protector suit. In your face, sharks. Among the things you can patent are video game mechanics.
At last, I shall rise above my fellow Uruks.
Sometimes these video game patents are granted for cool ideas that are, unfortunately, then completely off limits for use by other game makers. Check out our video on those, right here. Other times, these patents are for things so seemingly weird, wild, or incidental that you won't believe someone took the time to put in the patent application, or that someone else then went and rubber stamped it. Ponder these 7 game ideas that are, incredibly, protected by the power of the patent. Far more effectively than whoever field tested the Shark Protector suit. In your face, that guy.
Longtime fans of Square Enix's Final Fantasy series will be as familiar with its signature active time battle system as they are with the feeling of unrequited longing for someone with a physically impossible haircut, which is to say, very. Active time battle, or ATB for short, is a variation of turn-based combat used originally in Final Fantasy IV, most famously seen in Final Fantasy VII, and finally being retired in Final Fantasy X, with a quick return in a slightly different form in Final Fantasy XII. The way it worked was that each character would have its own internal clock, and the game would use timers to indicate when it was a party member's turn to act. This was determined by the character's speed and acted as a sort of initiative system. It also meant that these timers would continue to progress even while you were in menus making your choices, and some big actions would take longer to perform, adding a stressful element of quick thinking to the combat that many people found to be a fun challenge. Masochists, I think they're called. Anyway, you might be wondering why for a long time it was only Final Fantasy games using this system, the answer to which is, as you may have guessed from the title of this video, it was patented. The patent expired in 2010, meaning at that point anyone was free to use the active time battle system in their game, but by that point it had fallen out of favour, even with the series that spawned it, with Final Fantasy pivoting to real-time action RPGs in its most recent installments. Still, you can still see a version of it in action in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, where it's stressing us out all over again. Gotta say though, the haircuts are looking pretty good. I forgive you, Square Enix.
Before he was the face of a billion-dollar movie franchise, Sonic was but a simple hedgehog, sprinting from left to right across the screen and occasionally, briefly, upside down. Beyond Sonic 1's classic Loop the Loop, our pointy blue friend kicked things up a notch in Sonic the Hedgehog 2 with the graceful corkscrewing paths of the Emerald Hill Zone. Fancy stuff, thought 90s gamers, because it was a simpler time and we were simpler people. But the corkscrew stuff wasn't just regular fancy, it was patent-protected fancy on account of a patent filed by Sega of America in 1993 and granted in 1995 by the US Patent Office. This patent, titled Video Game with Spiral Loop Graphics, secured Sega the rights to their particular method of showing a game character traverse a path that, quote, banks at a severe angle, twists sideways, or even turns upside down. The method involves holding multiple appropriately angled versions of the game character's sprite in memory and then deploying the correct sprite for each location along the banked path, which in the game looked like this, and in the patent application looked like this. Hey, Paramount, where's his 3-picture deal?
When the Nintendo Wii first hit shop shelves, folks were skeptical. It required you to get up and move around. The controller was a weird nunchuck thing. It was called the Wii. However, the Wii quickly caught on, going on to become the 7th best-selling console of all time, shifting over 100 million units thanks to games like Super Mario Galaxy, Wii Sports, and Red Steel.
Hey, you're gonna die!
Okay, maybe not Red Steel. A big draw for the system was the motion controls and the versatility of the Wiimote that meant it could be placed into things such as a zapper for light gun games or a steering wheel to play Mario Kart.
A custom Wii wheel that makes its debut with Mario Kart for Wii.
But it seems Nintendo had even more plans in that direction, as we can see in this European patent that laid out even more ways in which the Wiimote could be incorporated into everyday objects to enhance the gaming experience. I don't know, you tell me if you can think of a single use for a teddy bear with a Wiimote shoved into it. Okay, a single PG-13 use. Some of the proposed peripherals make sense, like the tennis racket, baseball bat, and fishing rod. But what about the motorbike helmet and chair? And the tiny bicycle that you slot a Wiimote into the pedal of? For a Saw game where you play Billy the Puppet, maybe? Most likely this patent was created just to stop other companies from making stuff like this, which could be dangerous, but still makes you wonder how different things could have been if Nintendo had produced an official Wiimote teddy bear made of what is described as, non-porous material. Maybe the game is to throw it as far away from you as possible? We can only hope.
Now, I'm no fancy big city lawyer. Just ask any of my clients. During the 1 hour a day, they have access to the prison phone. But it seems to me, to make a video game about the Pokemon IP, you need to own the Pokemon IP. And yet... When Palworld launched in 2024, breaking Steam records and selling 12 million copies in its first 2 weeks, players were as delighted by the creature-collecting survival action adventure as they were amazed by the audacity of developer Pocket Pair. Pocket Pair, it seemed, had created a game that could only look more like a Pokemon game if it were a Pokemon game, which it is not. And we're sure it's not, right?
Yes!
Right. When late last year Palworld was hit with the inevitable infringement lawsuit, Nintendo and the Pokemon Company came after Pocket Pair not with how the Palworld creatures looked like the close cousins of all your favourite pokes, but instead citing 3 specific patents related to gameplay. Together, these 3 Japanese patents held by the Pokemon Company describe in detail some pretty distinctively Pokemonish gameplay, covering particular kinds of aiming, riding on characters, and most recognisably, throwing a ball at a character to capture them. Among the illustrations for these patents, we see a player character throwing a ball to summon what looks like a T-Rex to fight what looks like a pterodactyl. Ah, dinosaurs, nature's Pokemon. No one can copyright you. So far. The Palworld suit is ongoing, as is Palworld itself, with Pocket Pair having just celebrated 1 year of their game by dropping a roadmap for future updates. Given Nintendo's legal resources and taste for lawsuits, this thing is going to run and run, or my name is Jane Douglas, attorney at law.
Hello? It's your clients?
I'm not here.
The next patent is from Sony in general rather than PlayStation, so there's no guarantee that it will end up in your video games. But also, Sony make a lot of video games, so it could happen, although let's hope it doesn't, because this is a patent for commercials that force you to say the advertiser's name out loud before they'll close. As we can see from this charming patent illustration, this person is watching a TV show, or for the purposes of this video, let's say playing a game in which 2 people stand 2 feet apart and fire guns at each other. Looks like every round of Call of Duty I've ever played, to be fair. However, the player's game is then interrupted by a giant picture of a hamburger. "Say McDonald's to end commercial," barks the television, and the happy player leaps to their feet, hands aloft, and shrieks McDonald's before being returned to their shooting. Either that or they've jumped to their feet and are yelling at the TV because the last 6 times they shouted McDonald's it didn't work. Pretty dystopian. Let's hope this one stays in the patent office.
Like dancing on TikTok, Dance Dance Revolution isn't so much about dancing well as it is about dancing a lot. And in Dance Dance Revolution, in order to dance a lot, with the prescribed moves, to the rhythm of whatever track you select, you simply follow the directions of the game's moving arrows, hitting the corresponding panels laid out on the dance mat exactly as the moving arrows hit the target arrows. And And if you ever wondered why this simple and effective target arrow timing scheme appears only in Dance Dance Revolution games and short-lived dance game rival Pump It Up, that's because DDR developer Konami has a patent on it. The patent, titled Dance Game Apparatus and Step-On Bass for Dance Game, describes the DDR game system in detail and in particular lays out the DDR patented target arrow display, like so. If you're dancing like this on a DDR machine, you've already won. Where DDR had 4 arrows on its dance pad, Pump It Up had 5. It also had a somewhat similar looking target arrow display scheme, which led to a brisk lawsuit from Konami that was eventually settled out of court. But this Konami patent is the reason, for instance, that the more recent dance game Stepmania X has a familiar but legally distinct interface, crucially without the telltale target arrows. Another thing about TikTok dancers.
Oh no, they heard what you said and they're here!
Oh no, they're so fast and coordinated!
With the DualSense wireless controller, feel the impact of in-game actions via the dynamic sensory feedback in supported PS5 games.
Given the ubiquity of force feedback in video game controllers, you'd be forgiven for thinking it was a concept that everybody was free to use. After all, who doesn't love their controller buzzing like a malfunctioning Roomba whenever you get shot in a video game? It just really heightens the immersion. It turns out, however, that the concept of force feedback is in fact patented, and speaking of immersion, that is the name of the company who owns the patent, Immersion Corp. Any gaming company that wants to use force feedback and haptics in its hardware eventually seems to end up partnering with or licensing technology from Immersion. But there have been a few cases where companies have tried to hold out, the most famous being Sony versus Immersion back in 2002. At the time, Nintendo's GameCube controller had a different force feedback technology that Nintendo held the patent for. Microsoft, on the other hand, had settled with Immersion out of court, buying a 10% stake in that company so that they could use Immersion's technology in their Xbox controller. Sony, however, challenged Immersion, a decision that didn't end up going super well for them. Sony lost and were ordered to pay almost $100 million, and the PlayStation 3 launched without force feedback in its controllers, which Sony said was because it would interfere with the motion sensing in its new 6-axis controller, but which many suspected was due to the ongoing lawsuit with Immersion. Eventually the beef was settled and Sony and Immersion entered into a business agreement whereby they were allowed to use Immersion's technology. And then suddenly, PS3 controllers had force feedback in them. So make up your own mind. I think the TikTok dancers have been held at bay. We're all doing some sort of coordinated dance together.
Okay, we've got 1, maybe 1.5 minutes before the TikTok dancers break down the barriers that Andy has constructed. And in that time, I'm going to invite you to watch this video from Outside Xbox. It's well worth your time. Or this video from Outside Extra. Both excellent lists of this star. Andy! Oh no! No! They've got Andy. They've taken Andy. It's too late for him, but not for you. Please watch these videos from Outside Xbox and Outside Extra. Join the Patreon at patreon.com/OXClub if you'd like to meet us on the Discord. Andy, please, trying to wrap up this video. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time on Outside Xbox.